China EVs and More year-end review, where Lei and I will go over the year's most interesting and important news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. And now, for most of you that have followed us for more than a year, you know that really just means the China EV, AV, and mobility sector. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you help us get the word out about this podcast to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again. Will we have another episode this year? Maybe.
Probably this is the concluding.
Okay. So that must mean that the first episode in 2026 is what to expect in the year 2026 episode. So tune in again in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. My name is Tu Lee. I am the managing director at Sino Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I read a free weekly newsletter that we pull some of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Finally, kind of sort of has his office set up. Lei, can you please, and been studying for this episode, Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode 232. A Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. How did this year go by so fast? Episode of China EVs and More. And I've got my crew neck on in the holiday spirit. This is actually my daughter's volleyball crew neck shirt. It happens to be
Man,
red.
she's as big as dad now, huh? Wow.
Yeah. So 2025, how do we begin? I mean, we've done this. We started in 2021. This is our 5th year of doing
It's a
China
5 years, man.
Yeah.
5 years.
And if we go back some years back, remember there's this famous comment made by Mary Barra, who could be in her final days as a CEO. She said the industry will change over the next 5 years more than it has over the last 50. And for us, talking about China EVs and more, the industry changes the next 2 days more than the past week. That's how it feels, right? Because it's a constant process of events, news, controversies, new product launches. And when we say time flies when you're having fun, for us, it's time flies when we talk about China and the global EV, AV mobility sectors. Just kind of starting off. And then the way we're going to do this episode is, I did some homework. I went through some of my photo roll, some of the moments. I'm going to ask you, you must have your favorite moments of the year when it comes to China global EV, AV mobility. I do. We can do this chronologically because we can go back to CES in January 2025 all the way to the current, to the present, and kind of look back at some of the notable news, events, persons that we talked to, products that we experienced. That we can do that.
Am I going to cry? Am I going to get nostalgic, Lei? Because I can't think of what happened 2 months ago, let alone the last year. Because when you said all that, I thought about us being in Beijing, driving that Neo ET5.
There's one moment
with Brian Gould at CES, us having that roundtable in Shanghai. Let me get on my soapbox for 30 seconds. There's no one in the world that's doing what we do. And that's why we appreciate everyone that's listening and viewing and coming back. We don't advertise this show. We should, because There are a lot of posers out there that think they know or tell you that they travel, but they don't. We don't see them in China. You and I have been in China this year. I was in China 6 weeks, and you were longer. Um, so I appreciate all the listeners and followers that continue to be with us.
Well, I mean, I'll take it a step a little further. We don't know everything. We're still learning ourselves. So, and because it's a complicated world, literally and figuratively, in the in not only in the EV space, but politically, right, geopolitically, and economically, it's complex. And I think we since 2023 that we've been able to go back. I've been able to go back, and every time I think going back is we treasure our time there and we try to experience. And one thing you mentioned was, again, right, for the second consecutive year, we've driven a EV across the country. This time a Neo ET5 from Beijing to Shanghai. We swapped our way from Beijing to Shanghai without charging. That was one of the notable experiences of this year. And you mentioned talking to Brian Gu at CES almost a year ago. And the moment I'll remember is, you might remember as well, that had a consequence is after our interview, the person waiting next to talk to Brian is by the name of Kurt Bachmeier. He's the VP sales of Magna Steyr. And guess what? 10 months later, they announced a deal for XPeng to produce at the Austria facility. And the other Chinese automaker is GAC Group. They're already producing in Europe. And that's in a matter of 10 months, but the discussions, I'm sure, went on for longer than that. So I think that's one of the moments that I think I'll remember, because okay, we knew something was going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And then CES, I'll remember Zeekr was a packed house when they had the press conference at CES. We were there. They had a
Toyota had a big room, but they didn't announce anything. Akio Toyota got on stage, didn't really announce anything. I remember that.
We went to the NVIDIA Jensen Huang's keynote. Zoox was still testing in Vegas, but now they're commercially operating.
What a difference a year makes in
Right?
the autonomous vehicle space, huh?
Oh yeah, if I had to choose, I mentioned some of the keywords I will remember. I think definitely 2025 shaped up to be, I would say, in anticipation of a bigger robotaxi year in 2026, because we heard so much about robotaxi, what happened, not only in terms of collaboration, right? Neural, Lucid, Uber, Baidu, WeRide, Pony, they are expanding further out of China and working with some of these mobility providers outside of China. Baidu just announced Uber in London. So I think it was a year of
That might be the
expansion.
coolest city
Yeah,
outside of San Francisco, Lay, because London also has Wave. So it's
yeah.
a three-headed monster:
Waymo's
Wave,
there.
Baidu, and Waymo.
And then some of the, I think CES earlier this year, it was a lot of China factory actually. Li Automega was there. It was displayed with the part of the Dolby Vision Atmos. Great Wall Motors were there. The Great Wall Motor booth, I remember the hottest product on display, or the people most interested, was not any of their cars. It was that motorcycle, if you remember.
Yep.
Because
Oh, and by
Americans
the
love,
way,
right?
for those going to CES, rumor has it there's going to be an ET9, a Neo ET9 at the Dolby booth.
Oh, well, I mean, not that surprising to see piggybacking on other brands to have Chinese vehicles on display. So I think CES was fun because it was your first time. It was my eighth time, but I think despite the wall, both 100% EV tariffs and the ICV ban, they're still coming. At least branding wise, showing the tech.
They need to come.
Yeah,
We want that competition here because our friend Patrick George, who is the editor in chief of Inside EVs, he also writes for The Atlantic. He just posted on LinkedIn an article that said the passenger vehicle pricing backlash has begun. In the United States, a passenger vehicle now averages over 50,000 US dollars. And so how do we get lower price? We bring more competitors in.
The average loan in the US, I think, is like $750 a month.
And the crazy thing is, Lei, when you and I were living in China, before we lived in China, the longest uh like loan on average was like 60 months.
I
So
just
now it's 72 months, and people are trying to compare apples and oranges. Oh, my car payment is $400 a month, or $500 a month, or $600 a month. And then you peel layers of the onion back or ask them in more detail. It's like, oh, yeah, it's a 72. And it's like, dude, you're not paying the same amount. Your monthly payment is the same, but you're not paying the same amount.
I just saw a headline saying 100-month loans. This is
Oh
on
my
Wall Street
God.
Journal. Anyways, I'm paying $550 a month for a 48-month loan, almost toward the end, 6 months to go. So I'm almost done, but that kind of gives you. And in
Not
China, also speaking of loans, I think one of the key words was this past year, the relating to the price war and the number of brands offering zero interest financing, zero down, zero interest financing. I mean, almost everyone is doing it because that's part of the competitive environment.
and
Talk-
and
Right.
then we went to Munich, right?
Well, we got to
Let's
talk about
summarize.
Shanghai first.
Oh, yeah, okay. Let's talk about Shanghai. Well, we're jumping around a little bit, so let's just go with some of the numbers because I normally don't take notes, but I'm gonna take. I took some notes because it is the year end, and one of the biggest themes this year was exports. Exports specifically into Russia, into Europe, into Latin America, Mexico specifically. And those are the three areas that have gotten a lot of Chinese exports, not only clean energy exports, but ICE exports. The UK also, with SAIC being a strong player due to its MG connection. And so one of the big things, Chery, BYD, Geely, big exporters. Okay. When we look at the numbers, you hear about Neo, XPeng, and BYD entering these foreign markets, but it's really BYD driving the volume. Okay. They're going to be at 4.6, 4.7 million units this year. About 20% of those are exported, and they're already in over 100 markets. Any emerging markets that they enter, Israel, Thailand, within months, they're the number one clean energy brand. Okay. And so it really creates a lot of, let's
Well,
say, alarm for the legacy automakers.
well,
And
one
the theme, one hint I'll say, Lay, really quickly before I hand it back to you is that one of the themes that we might be talking about in 2026 is how the price war might be exported into these markets. So I'll
well,
let you take over. But
well, yeah. There's a few topics here. You mentioned price war last. I think price war 2025. I would say the price war seems to be waning a bit. Not to say that it's not going on, but compared to 23 and 24,
maybe we're just
what
numb.
right, compared to 2023 and 24, 25, we saw the industry and government bodies launch several initiatives. There's the 60-day payment term requirement. There's the joint kind of the industry call for orderly competition. There's the rules on the use of jargons on ADAS because of several controversial accidents. There's a couple of accidents involving Li Auto and Xiaomi. So, and then that kind of give you an idea of people are thinking before they, because one of the things that happened, I remember at the end of May is when BYD launched that latest price cut. Then the industry came out, people followed, and the industry came out with that call for orderly competition. And then speaking of one of the moments that I remember, you mentioned BYD, is us in Munich watching the press conference, and Stella Lee, she showed a PowerPoint with 32 countries, 1,000 dealers. And we joked, by the way, that's not 32 countries in the world. That's 32 countries in Europe, 1,000 dealers in Europe.
Oh,
We made a point, right? And then she already mentioned that they're going to expand that 1,000 dealership point to 2,000 by the end of next year. That's in Europe alone. Yeah, so that was quite memorable. And then for me, speaking of BYD again, they've had their share of good and the bad and the controversial because they're facing some headwinds. But for me personally, witnessing BYD getting that World Urban Car of the Year at the New York Auto Show, that was one of the historical moments, right? I think that was the first time that a Chinese brand vehicle has gotten that award. And then Stella Lee getting that Car Person of the Year award. And kind of having a conversation with her, and she's petite, but the aura around her. I mean, we saw the press conference is huge. I think, right?
she commanded that
Yeah,
stage. It was the
yeah,
biggest
yeah.
stage at IAA, and she was up there owning it.
But then again, right? We talked about the price cuts and BYD needing to adhere to the 60 payment terms, and then they starting to see that affect their books of profitability because BYD is notorious with these payment terms in the industry. And they had their BYD Dilian, which is their own kind of the what do you call it, the financial chain of how they pay their suppliers and the way. So yeah, so it's good and the bad, right? And we have to be fair and yeah, they're running away, they're exporting, but they face their own issues just like everyone else. So
So what? So let me, and we have a lot to talk about, so I want to move
we're
forward.
not,
But
by the way, we're not going to be exhaustive. It's impossible. We can talk this for a day, whole day.
for our newer listeners and viewers, you got to go watch the Brian Gu video because a lot of what he said in January of 2025 now is going to be dots connected and it make a lot of sense because XPeng is ascending while BYD is descending a little bit, and Geely is also ascending. Geely also just brought Zeekr private, so I think there's going to be a little more
That
flexibility
was a big
for
change.
Zeekr in the future as well. And then the other thing that I think that I have a lot of pride in is that roundtable that we did at the Shanghai Auto Show with
Host.
Ed White, the Financial Times journalist, correspondent, Jill Shen. She left TechNode, but she was the TechNode technology and autos writer, and then Ethan Robertson, who is Wheels Boy. So for those of you, that was a two-parter because we talked for almost 2 hours. And again, thank you for Neo House or for Neo for allowing us to record it at the Neo House in Shanghai, right next to the largest Starbucks reserve in the world. Um,
And right across from the Durant Guild,
yes,
which went
that
poof.
closed.
Yeah. Well, it's no longer. It was a good try from GM, but um,
So, really quickly, NEV export leaders, BYD, with year over year currently about 45% increase. AIC with an increase of the 10 to 20%, Geely Group plus 30%, Cherry at 250. Now, the important thing about Cherry Lay is they went IPO in Hong Kong
hang on, yeah.
this year. The big thing is about 25% of their exports goes to Russia. During the IPO, they announced that they were going to exit that market. So, first of all, there's going to be a vacuum that is going to be filled by other Chinese brands, first and foremost. And then, second, it'll be an important year for Cherry to show where it can make up that 25% of sales. They're firing on all cylinders. They have Omada. They have, what are some of the other brands they have, Lay?
Exceed. I just tweeted Exceed launched announced several new nameplates: ET9, ES8, ES7 GT. I'm like, yeah, that's not on purpose, right?
Yeah, if the Chinese brands aren't confusing enough,
Well, they had the
and so
iCar, Exceed, what else?
I forget
Cherry,
Omoda,
Armada,
Cherry.
JQ on the
Anyways,
international markets.
so a shout out to our friend Nick Carey. He had written a piece earlier this year on Reuters that talked about how within 2 months, Chery built a Euro spec Omoda from a Chinese spec because the European team said this is not going to sell. The steering's not great, not for the European market. And so maybe we can also give our finally, because they're still lingering. It's not as much, but maybe rest in peace this thought that these vehicles aren't competitive. These vehicles aren't very good. These vehicles are great. I would buy one if I could in the US market. I know you would, Lay, because when a Xiaomi can come in, build two cars in 3.5, almost 4 years, and this year, you had mentioned this in an earlier episode, hit almost 450,000 units. That's an amazing number. Again, piggybacking off of something you said, Lay, the ABB, Audi, Beamer, Benz, they haven't touched a million units. Within 4 years, Xiaomi with two products. BMW has a dozen products. Audi has dozens of products. So they're doing this with two products. The U7, which Marquez Brownlee famously reviewed just a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know how much that pricing would be. It could come here for 60 grand and it would sell.
Yeah, some of the numbers, since you mentioned XPeng, they produced their millionth vehicle. Leap Motor, they produced their millionth vehicle. Xiaomi, they produced their 500,000th vehicle cumulatively. And these three companies have the potential to produce and sell either a million or close to a million next year. I think that's kind of mind-boggling because Xiaomi is only less than 5 years old in terms of their EV business. And Li Motor already announced they plan to sell a million units in 2026. And then speaking of other numbers, I think the three numbers that will there's 330 million in 2025 that happened. One, in the first 11 months, China auto production's output and sales already surpassed 31 million units. Obviously, close to 6-7 million units are going to be exported. Chang'an just produced their 30 millionth vehicle in their history. BMW and Volkswagen produced their 30 million vehicle. I think that just gives you idea of the sheer scale and size of the market, of the industry. And there's probably about over 40 million NEVs on the roads in China, more than 10% of all vehicles on the roads, right? It's quite difficult to comprehend, but the conclusion is China is an NEV market. It's no longer, right? We heard about CPCA announcing that 60% of passenger vehicle sales, retail, will be NEVs in the month of December. The chasm, right? We've gone way past that. If 10% was a turning point, then 50% is another huge turning point. And China is kind of way ahead. Yeah, those are some of the numbers that I thought of.
Kind of a microcosm, just because a lot of the numbers that you had spoken about are in the mass market. There's an article, I believe, our friend Jiri from Car News China had posted about the Stellato, how that luxury sedan is now taking sales from the S500, from the 7
Oh,
Series.
the Maxtro.
Yeah, the Maestro, sorry.
Bloomberg, I just tweeted a Bloomberg tweet that they're the top selling vehicle of $100,000 or more.
So there you go. And this reinforces what I've said all year long, that brands, the heritage brands, they are kind of meaningless, the history, the heritage, because in China, the consumers are all about what have you done for me lately. And the Maestro, I'm not a fan of the exterior design, but it is pretty luxurious. And man, that has to be a head scratcher for Merc and Audi and Beamer. And if we had to rank them, I would say BMW is probably in the best position to rebound. Merc and Audi are going to continue to struggle, I think. But what do you think?
Well, we've seen the first attempts at, let's not talk about the upper kind of the top segment, but really Audi, the AUDI brand, launched the 5 Sportback in the 200,000 RMB range. The Mercedes locally produced CLA is priced in the 200,000 range, right? It's unthinkable. First of all, the price range. Second of all, launching a new brand. Third of all, it's all Chinese tech inside. It's Huawei inside. It's Momenta inside. They've gone kind of deep into this rabbit hole in order to compete. And the initial, I don't know if you've seen the numbers, the initial numbers, the first couple of months or a month, the numbers are not that great. So because the competition, others are launching. I mean, we should talk about Neo in a bit, but just the last few weeks and in a month or so, the Neo, the Envo is actually facing some headwinds, partially due to the scrap that you mentioned, the scrap incentives. Also due to the other, like I could think of Geely Galaxy M9, for example, launching at more competitive pricing points. So it's kind of difficult that you don't, what is the secret success formula? You don't have one. I mean, you put the Chinese tech inside. Does it help? That's the hope.
The other thing that is really important to kind of remember is that mostly European brands, but there are some American brands. GM with Momenta in the China market, Toyota, Mercedes also with Momenta in the China market. These European brands and Japanese brands, Korean brands, they have all announced partnerships with Chinese technology companies. And I think it's has surprised some people, some analysts, and they don't have anything capable. One of the things that I remember, and I'm jumping around a little bit, so my apologies, is going to the Neo Media event at the Shanghai Auto Show, and then Li Bin pulling out 2 chips out of his pocket and said, "We are going to be using the Turing chips to power our one for the infotainment, one for the autonomous or intelligent driving." So we're gonna NVIDIA and Qualcomm and AMD and Mobileye, they're gonna have to do a lot of work if they're going to try to protect any of this market share, this dominant market share, specifically NVIDIA and Qualcomm that they have in intelligent driving and infotainment systems for these cars. Because I won't say that Neo and XPeng with its Shenxing are that close yet, but it's only a matter of time. And I guarantee you that these chips, the silicon is going to be much cheaper than what NVIDIA charges the OEMs.
Yeah, we can't talk about China EVs more without talking about Wei Xiaoli, which is Neo, XPeng, and Li Auto, because they're kind of the OGs and they're also the 3 public listed companies in the US, are EV startups. They are as same as they're different. Because I think for 2025, we look back, it's the year where Li Auto is in the lead at the beginning. And now at the end of the year, Li Auto is fighting. And Neo and Xpeng, they seem to be getting on the right track, right? The ES8, they've already delivered 40,000 units. I think, if I get the number right, it's 30 or 40. And it felt like they're both 10 years old. Seeing this after 10 years is kind of a little bit of redemption for Neo, I think, right? Because they launched a model that was their first kind of, that brought them to the scene, the ES8. And now it's flying off the lots, right? I think 19 days they sold another 10,000 units.
Well, it's important to also note that the Envo brand is helping with their volume. So
Yeah, I mean, the one of the moments, right, was attending the Almo launch on July 31st, and the moment that the price dropped 265,800 full price, and then the next moment was when it was 170 some thousand renminbi for a large 3-row 6-seater battery electric SUV. That was the moment when the Bin God was cemented. People are calling him Bin God, right? Not Bin Ge. Bin Ge is brother Bin, right? And yeah, so I think I'll tell you my favorite moment of the year is celebrating my birthday post Neo Day in Hangzhou.
hmm.
That was yeah, uh, you know, and then really seeing Neo. They Still iffy whether they can get to that profitability. I don't know. I think it's going to be tough.
That battery swapping is is such a unique thing because if you think about battery swapping in the rest of the world, it's a really, really heavy lift. Case in point, Ample, the San Francisco-based battery swapping startup, has filed for bankruptcy. I went to the BYD event in Beijing right after the Shanghai Auto Show, where they demonstrated the as fast as gas, 1,000
Yeah.
kilowatt
Yeah. That was a
speed,
megawatt flash charging.
and that's nothing short of amazing. I also got to try out God's Eye for about 20 minutes, and to me, if we're talking about moving the entire global sector forward, God's Eye as standard on 20 of its 22 vehicles when it was announced is an ultimate game changer for me, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I remember this was in March when BYD announced two things. One is the ADAS for all, which is the God's Eye ABC, right? And then the megawatt flash charging 1,000 volt, and then 5 minutes get you 400 kilometers range back. And I kind of joked that BYD means don't have to wait. Following BOD, which means cheaper than gas.
Yeah.
The acronym BYD, we made some fun on that. Yeah, that was back in
Ugh.
March. And then it was the Shanghai Auto Show. Shanghai Auto Show, obviously, again, it's the Shanghai Auto Show is where I think after 2 years, right? The 2023 Shanghai Auto Show is when these foreign automakers kind of the reckoning moment. And Volkswagen, they put up 3 words at their group night. It was let me check. It was discuss, decide, deliver. And next year is really the year for delivery for Volkswagen Group. They're set up. And
Well,
then
they're going to start with the ID Unix, which is off of the XPeng platform.
yep. And then Audi, AUDI, both Audi and the four-ring Audi, I think they put up some vehicles with Huawei inside. I think it's FL that has Huawei system inside.
The other thing too is these legacy automakers, they put meaning behind in China for China.
And the Shanghai Auto Show is also when this year, remember, it wasn't like Beijing where all these CEOs were checking out each other's booth and talking, and it was pandemonium. Beijing wasn't at Shanghai Auto Show because of that accident. He tried to remain a bit low key. So the Shanghai Auto Show, I think for a long time, felt really like an international auto show without the brouhaha of these CEOs walking the booths and causing these. Remember the year before Beijing Auto Show, the whole hall where Xiaomi was at was jam packed, right?
Yes.
But I personally, what I did was in that line to get a hat from Xiaomi. I waited for about 30 minutes to get a hat.
Ugh.
It just shows you, speaking of Xiaomi, that the fan base. I think their fan base has really helped them. Aside from, yeah, I mean, the Marcus Brownlee, he reviewed this U7 tech wise, the vehicle wise, right? He gave it a plus. But the fan base is something that I think just holds Xiaomi. I mean, whatever controversies, whatever accidents, they're gonna sell 400,000 units.
Yeah, and since next year the auto show is in Beijing, I plan to, do a few things
It's right
that
around
I
the
think would
corner.
be fun. It's crazy, right? Right around the corner. And anyways, what let me see here. The other thing that I wrote down here is GM and SAIC. GM had a $5 billion write down on its joint venture with
Right.
SAIC, SGM. And so, complementary to that, because it's an American automaker, Ford launches an electric and a e-rev Bronco, and GM alongside it launches an MPV, the GL8, in two versions, a business version and a family version, completely different, at least interior, exterior with the features. And unfortunately, they are not coming to the US market. I think our friend Wheels Boy Ethan Robertson got to check out both Broncos, and so I'll be keen to speak with him, and we'll speak with him and figure out what he thinks of the Bronco for China. I
Yeah,
I actually posted it in my newsletter because I thought it was important that Westerners know that Ford is moving forward with clean energy outside of the United States, as they announced 2 or 3 weeks ago a $19.5 billion write down of EV assets and failed contracts. While China is setting the pace, the legacy automakers are doing everything they can to get to the starting line in order to compete. Now, they're not competitive. You and I agree on that. What GM is doing, what Ford is doing, what Volkswagen is doing is not going to actually get them ahead. It's going to get them to the starting line where they hope the Chinese still are. But you and I know that even if the Chinese government is keeping a close eye on pricing and involution, the China market is still going to be pushing itself forward and setting the global pace.
the Buick, Ford, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, their vehicles, their branding in the Chinese market, I call it the Chineseification of these brands, because the Buick, the Electra sub-brand, the Ford Bronco PHEV and the BEV, right? These you cannot get outside of China. Yet they're American brands and they're Chineseified. I hate that word, but same as every other foreign automakers. And you don't have to be locally producing. I think I've mentioned this. You don't have to be locally producing to be localized. Renault, they're developing, they have a China R&D arm for their products outside of China. Porsche just opened the only R&D facility outside of Germany, and they will institute some of the locally developed functionalities into imported Porsches, most likely the Cayenne EV, and they're not producing. They're probably never going to produce because they're going to sell that less than 50,000 units this year in China.
They're going to have to, they're going to have to perhaps shut down capacity in Europe because they've
Volkswagen
lost
just
so much
closing
sales.
the Glasser manufacture in Dresden is the epitome of what's happening. Yeah. And we go back to profitability. I think, there's, I think a lot of headlines does say the Chinese are competing at losses, right? But also on the foreign automaker, their financial status aren't as great. I mean, we saw the numbers from Porsche, right? From 18 to 20% return on sales to low single digits, 1-2%. That's difficult to comprehend for Porsche, Volkswagen Group, right? Yeah, and then just today, right? ZF sold their ADAS business to Harman.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, we think about ZF, right? A tier one, traditional German tier one. They're in an ADAS place, and they sold it to Harman. Harman is what? Infotainment,
Yeah,
cockpit, right?
well, originally they're known for speakers
Yeah.
and sound.
So yeah, nothing is surprising anymore. What you have to do to kind of survive, and yeah,
The one thing that, so, I was on Autoline last week kind of talking about competitiveness and innovation. I think traditional automotive folks, analysts, journalists, they need to get their head around the fact that tier ones are now technology companies. And some of the technology companies, the Nvidias, the AMDs, the Amazons, they dwarf the OEMs from valuation, from a money in the bank standpoint. So the OEMs won't be able to push them around like they did traditional tier ones. Just remember this, guys. NVIDIA supplies. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if you're a buyer at General Motors, if you're talking to NVIDIA, it's for server chips and silicon, right? 6, 7 years ago. Now, and so that's an indirect buy because it doesn't go onto the product. But now you need product buyers that understand silicon design, silicon fabrication, and kind of roadmaps and how fast it goes every 10, every 12 months. You need product buyers, direct buyers to know that. And ask your friends that work in automotive, just ask them a simple question. Who is sourcing on your team? Who is sourcing silicon? Is it the indirect buyers or is it direct buyers? That'll tell you how important the OEMs think sourcing silicon is to the product or not important it is, because it should be, because it's such a value on the bill of materials, it's such a high value component that it needs a lot of attention. And the other thing that's really important, if I'm buying a Thor chip from NVIDIA, my product team better know how to get the most out of it. And we know that the Xiaomi's, the Li Autos, the XPengs, the Neos, we know they know how to get the most out of it because they're technology first. They're not automotive first. But the car companies are really trying to get their heads around what features can we pack so that we're optimizing for this Thor chip in our hardware software stack. And again, we're talking philosophical, Lay, but this is a fundamental difference between the Chinese companies and the Western companies that the Western companies are just trying to figure out at this point in time.
Yeah, and also you mentioned earlier Weixiaoli. Weixiaoli are all three of them are doing their own SoCs. Rivian just announced, right? But comparing to Lead Motor is profitable. Li Auto swung to a loss last quarter, but Lead Motor is profitable, but they're gonna get to 1 million next year. They depend on Qualcomm for both of their cockpit and ADAS, the kind of the single chip solution.
And does this mean
This is a
that
kind of a contrast. What I'm trying to say is that you could buy or do it in-house. What justifies it? I think at this point, it's not clear yet because you do need the volume to justify it. And even a lead motor who's getting to 1 million units, they're not doing their own chips or SoCs. So you figure
well, the other thing
it's a
too, Lay,
business.
is that when we think Leap Motor, we should think Citroen, we should think Peugeot, we should think Dodge,
With
because
yeah.
if I'm Filosa, I'm quietly looking at my components across all of these small car platforms and comparing them to Leap Motors' bill of materials for their small cars. Because what I really want to do is, if there's a great supplier supplying a high margin or a high cost driving component on the bill of materials, I want to leverage that across all of my vehicles around the world. Stellantis is one of the few that can truly do that because they have French brands, they have Italian brands, they have I want to say, do they have German brands? Anyways, but you know
Opel.
what I'm talking about. Yeah, so this is where Stellantis really has a leg up on the competitors. Volkswagen, they're just completely different because they're going to rely so heavily on Rivian for the US market and so heavily on XPeng for the China market. Now, they'll argue that they bring a lot to the table, but really do they? I don't know. I'm really, really scratching my head a little bit, and I'll have a much, much more thorough opinion probably mid 26 when I get a better idea of what they're licensing from Rivian and what they're licensing from XPeng.
So
So,
interestingly enough, you mentioned Stellantis. Recently, a couple of Jeep executives visited DPCA, which is a Dongfeng Peugeot Citroen joint venture. Shenlong in Chinese is called Shenlong. So there's a possibility of Jeep returning production in China through that joint venture. And Jeep has failed twice in China.
well, they
So figure,
succeeded and then failed
yeah,
because for a while Jeep was doing really, really well.
yeah.
And then Great Wall caught up, and then everybody kind of caught up.
But I mean, from an international expansion perspective, Leap Motor definitely has lesser of upfront investment because they can utilize the Stellantis dealership footprint through that sales joint venture,
Right.
right? And then Li Auto, they're starting to expand into the mid-Asia, other parts of the world, right? In 2026, they'll go into more markets. Xiaomi, 2027, they've already said 2027 launching in Europe and other regions. So look out. Yeah. So we talked about 50 minutes. That 50 minutes went by like China speed.
Yes, it did. I actually, you got me thinking, Lay. Are there any other subtopics that you wanted to
No, I
talk
think
about?
I think the other thing that I think will also define 2025 is when we talk about the China EV AV mobility, we now have to add one more component. It's the embodied AI or robotics, because everybody is talking about it these days. Whether it's Li Auto launched its smart glasses. XPeng has a humanoid robot. Tesla, others may be in the works. We don't know. And then there's these millions and millions of Chinese robotic companies. And then we have to throw in the kind of the Meituans, the Neolixes, because they're part of the ecosystem. And we can't talk about this ecosystem without the LiDAR companies. LiDAR companies, speaking of bankruptcy, Luminar just filed for bankruptcy. As Hesai and RoboSense, they're starting to deliver on the scale of millions and millions of LiDARs per year. A couple of years ago, it was just talk of the entire LiDAR industry passing the million unit mark. And now each of these two players, they're going to deliver over 1 million LiDARs. This is both for the ADAS and the robotaxis and the Neolixes. And the opportunity is something that's presented more recently, these level 3 permits that Chang'an and BAIC have recently gotten. Because level 3 autonomy will use multiple LiDARs, which are in the hundreds of dollars cost-wise these days. So I think that LiDAR volumes is going to balloon despite we have two kind of tracks, the Tesla and the XPeng vision only kind of the approach versus the rest, which believe Rivian is also one, which believe the LiDAR to be a critical safety component and commoditized, democratized component.
They highlighted it in AI.
Yeah. And I kind of tweeted, who we both, we it's RoboSense most likely, but right, they're getting into international markets, even on private vehicles that you can buy.
Well, the other thing that's really important, you talked about embodied AI in the United States. I think they call it physical AI. So a lot of these humanoids, a lot of these non-automotive robots that are either cleaning streets, cleaning malls, lawn mowing, there's a lot of application that needs LiDAR in the robotic and autonomous space. We are just talking about robotaxis, but think of defense, think of all of these applications where somebody is driving or controlling that. LiDAR now is going to be a part of the eyes for any, whether it's a Roomba, right? Like,
Well,
there's
I,
all types of applications for these kind of things, industrial and then, commercial and private. But so they're going to be lower margin, but the volumes are going to be driven by all of these other applications because the automotive side is so regulated. It's going to be one of the things that is still unclear is what the policy and regulatory environment is going to be for Chinese technology on Western roads. We know in the United States it's been restricted, but if the Trump administration doesn't enforce it, now what happens? And then the EU, I think they probably are going to have a much more robust policy towards Chinese technology in 2026. So we'll have to wait and see.
I think it's fluid. So we've heard that even though I think actually Mexico might be the number one export destination at this point, past Russia, but both Russia and Mexico are either already or considering putting more restrictions or higher tariffs on China vehicles, Chinese vehicles imported into the country, right? So those are, we're watching. US, you can't really, it's a wall, it's blocked. UK, it was announcing this pay per mile thing for EVs, but it's a different, I mean, right,
All the
region.
while, the United States, with shows like Landman, are trying to pull out the tail for oil consumption or oil usage. So, and and then I bumped into Bob Lee, who's the head of LG North America, a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that he emphasized was that LG and SK had mentioned it as well with Ford, that they're pivoting towards battery energy storage. And Ford, during their analyst call, when they announced the $19.5 billion write down, they said that they're moving from NMC
LFP.
pouch to LFP prismatic. So I might have gotten that swapped, but I think that's right. And so people wonder if LFP is here to stay, if there's going to be an emerging battery chemistry or technology that's
Well, I
going
mean,
to usurp it. And I don't see that happening for the foreseeable future. So
the foreign automakers, Volkswagen will have to depend on Goshen, for example, and then Ford on CATL. I mean, we were at the CATL press event ahead of the Shanghai Auto Show. Remember how many types of tech and products they announced at that event? There's the second generation.
they
Yeah,
kind of emphasized the three major business lines that they had, right?
yeah. So the sodium ion, the second generation Shenxing, super fast charging batteries, the LFP for heavy duty trucks, the multi chemistry kind of the battery pack C charging, right? And then I got to visit their the CAIT, which has their CIIC, which is the CATL Intelligent something chassis. I forget. So CATL is more than a battery supplier. Case in point, JD, GAC Ion, and CATL, they jointly announced that battery swappable Ion Super. It caused some kind of controversy because they didn't promise some of the things that they promised for the consumers. I think 2025 is also the year of battery swapping starting to go mainstream. Not only NEO, CATL has already, they have these stations, close to 1,000 already by the end of this year. To for some of the lower segments, not the premium segments, but Firefly, right? Firefly actually, I think, had a great year despite the controversial design that was announced last year.
Let me
And
see here.
Neo is closing in on 100 million swaps. Probably they'll get there in January.
One thing that I think is also really important to kind of separate, and we'll wrap up here and get to questions. Let's separate Cherry, BYD, Geely a little bit, and Great Wall from a lot of the other players because they've announced or already started building factories outside of China. So they have a distinct advantage in case export backlash gets more serious across the rest of the world. You know that Mexico has increased their tariff or announced that they're increasing their tariff. Brazil has increased their tariff. The United States is still at 100%. So these important markets for the Chinese are creating protectionism. The EU is a little bit different, but and it's typically schizophrenic where Spain wants more foreign direct investment because CATLs and all these companies are making it an electric vehicle and battery hub for Europe. And then while the labor unions in France and in Germany really don't want more exports. So
Well,
we will get into this deeper in our looking ahead to 2026 episode in about 2.5 weeks. But
yeah,
Leg,
just backing on your last comment is that while China moves further ahead, I think we saw EU is currently discussing walking back from the 2035 ban on ICEVs. US, the EPA, right? They've kind of walked back on the previous targets. So these, I think, may present further opportunities for who can provide the products on the EV side, because the foreign automakers are walking back on their home turf. So that's what we're seeing, despite the tariffs, right? Despite um the blockade, it hasn't stopped. I mean,
It
because
has not.
you're offering the products at the price point, at the features that the consumers are willing to buy.
And we're reaching an inflection point, but in the next 5, 7 years, there's gonna be more Chinese companies that are building outside of China.
I think also, just maybe close off of it, 2025 is also the last year of the 14th five-year plan, which in China, every 5 years, there's these economic and direction-wise of what the country wants to achieve. We heard about the 15th five-year. So 2026 is starting the 15th five-year plan. And obviously, Kai Men Hong, auspicious start. People want an auspicious start. And we talk about the scrap subsidies possibly coming back in 2026, because there's also the economic pressure of domestic consumption that we all know it's not like what it's before.
The real estate market in China is weighing heavily on the economy.
I
That's
mean,
one of the factors.
I'm a personal example. I sold mine last December, a year ago, and since then, how much have the housing prices come down? I, I don't know, 20%, 25%.
I guess you're lucky, huh?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
that you got out when you did.
it's yeah.
So, Lei, I posed this question to the audience, but I'll let you answer it first, and then I'll read some of the comments. Car, and this is kind of unfair because I think if we go to China, we could just ask them and they'll let us borrow it. But currently, what car would you buy? Would you try out for a week if you could? Car with Chinese brand.
Oh, that's crazy. I don't know. Maybe get the. Well, we've done Xpengs, we've done Neos. I don't know.
Maestro, baby. Maestro.
Yeah. I mean, that's over the top. I don't know, like something like a Leap Motor D19 or something, or one of the
I'm gonna
Huawei. Actually, one of the Huawei brands is definitely on the bucket list.
yes. I think I wouldn't mind trying out the Yangwang. See what that's all about.
Which one, the SUV or the sports?
SUV. The sports car, I would just get into an accident. I don't need to be getting
Well,
into
the
an
the other
accident in
thing I
China.
think I
So
remember happened this year was iShow Speed, right? The top streamer. He went to China in March. I think people all over the world kind of saw through his lens what China was about, and he was actually in one of the young ones.
so that's the thing. That triggered Lei these Chinese brands to reach out to all these KOLs that are on TikTok in the
Yeah,
US.
Marquise Brownlee, right? I mean, he revealed
Yeah,
Video 7.
so
So
so they are infiltrating the US market, whether the US government wants to or not, trying to enter the minds of young people, which I think is a brilliant, brilliant idea. And it tells you the level of confidence that they have to let Marquez try it out. And now, I don't, did he get paid? I don't know. He should, he should definitely acknowledge if he's gotten paid or not. But outside of that, letting them have the keys for a couple days and trying it out themselves, I think that's brilliant. Let me go to some of the comments here. Urban Guitar Legend. Well, definitely nothing here in the US is decent except Tesla, and I'm not touching that because of Elon, but the Neo Envoy L90 was definitely a surprise after the dismal sales of the L6. Sounds like Urban Guitar Legend wants to try out an L90. The Mace. I might be in the minority on this, but one brand I had high hopes for when they came to North America a couple years ago was VinFast. Their collapse in the US this year was sad, but also predictable. Urban Guitar Legend Xiaomi has managed to move past two major accidents relatively unscathed sales wise. The decline of Li Auto, I think, rather has been rather dramatic within a few quarters. Oh, our friend Felix. Leapmotor, I'd say. They have a 28,000 euro family BEV in the Netherlands. 1 second here. This is so bad. I can't. It
Yeah,
keeps on moving down.
as a putting a consumer hat, I also tweeted this, right? I'm ready to switch to EV, and Tesla will still be at the top of the consideration list. I can't put anybody else in equal footing with Tesla just because I think they're most established in terms of EVs, and if I do get it, I probably will try FSD. It looks like it's interesting that we didn't talk about is because of the robotaxi. Supposedly, they're now testing the robotaxis without the safety drivers in Austin. Where does that go compared to the Waymo? They're going to be in 20 cities in 2026. They just crossed the 20 million trip mark. I think it's definitely interesting to see here in the US that part of the race.
Waymo is way ahead of everyone in the world. So that competition is just going to heat up in 2026. Urban Guitar Legend. Guitar Legend says Neo will be profitable even if it's not in Q4. It will happen soon. It may seem crazy, but battery swap can be mini power plants with solar and game changer for third world countries. I spent 6 months in Madagascar last year. Battery swap could help stabilize grid. Let me see. So Mace thinks the EREV Bronco is pretty intriguing, and the ZF Harman announcement came from left field. Here's a question from our friend Felix, who greeted us from Amsterdam. Do you expect Xiaomi to do a Tesla and build their own dealerships, aka service spots?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So Tesla has independent or Tesla owned service centers. Is that what Felix is asking?
Yeah, that's
Because remember in Beijing, they had that huge one that they launched several years ago now. So I think Xiaomi will partner. It's a pretty heavy lift, and Tesla is a $1.5 trillion company. So I don't know if Xiaomi has that level of capital that they would go alone. You know, the brand is recognizable, but not like it is in China where it is ubiquitous. That's my
yeah, currently my understanding is Xiaomi's services, they're not that greatly widespread. I think you still have to drive all the way to Yizhuang or something to their main servicing center. My understanding, I could be wrong, because all of their showrooms are purely showrooms. They don't have this S capability yet.
And they moved out of high rent malls into like second level malls in these cities where the retail store is actually not super impressive like it was in the past. Felix also asked, do you expect December 2026 actual sales possibly for Xiaomi cars in Europe, Q1 deliveries? Can Xiaomi outrun Tesla in China in 2026? Wow. Felix bringing the heat. What do you
2026,
think? Like,
they've done 400,000 units this year. Oh, I I think there's a very good chance that it does. And not only Xiaomi, there's others, right? I mentioned that are looking at possibly close to 1 million. Tesla has never done 1 million in China. I
Tesla's
think the
only
most
hit
they've done was 600,000.
650, 630, something like
Oh,
that.
oh yeah. So I mean, if we do that, if we do the math, yeah, they're going to top Tesla next year. I mean, we can make that prediction now.
Yeah, I think
Right? It's if
that's realistic.
everything is, if nothing hiccups or right, which I don't see at this point.
And I can't imagine a product that Tesla launches in 26 in the China market that would be this runaway hit. I don't. You know, there's too much competition.
Well, the Model YL seems to have done pretty well from their Model Y lineup. Interesting enough, that's hence the resilience. I think I mentioned the resilience, some maybe a keyword that after all this time, right? I think Tesla is still doing okay, but I mean they're losing share definitely. We're
And
gonna see their
well,
numbers, Q4 numbers globally. Currently, it's only in the 400,000, low 400,000 range.
and the
Last
The
year
other
they
thing
did close to 500,000. They're not gonna do that much in Q4 this year. Definitely not. So
the other thing that I think is important, 2026 is probably, in my opinion, might be a down year for vehicle sales in China because the price war is gonna be leveling off. So the weaker players are gonna find it harder to export, and maybe we'll start to see some of the players go away. So Urban Guitar Legend asks, need travel advice, guys. Want to hit the Neo factory. How difficult is it for foreigners to test drive cars? Do other
Neo Neo F2, I think you can sign up for visits, but you can pay for the visit. I think it's like I don't know, a couple of thousand RMB, if I remember correctly. But you have to be in a group. I don't know if you can do it alone. You might, but they're opening
well,
that.
if you were doing it alone, they'd put you in a group probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you go to China, just go to any dealership, just go to any showroom, just ask for a test ride. That's what I do. You might need a, I don't know.
Does our
How-
driver's license work? Urban Guitar Legend, I'm assuming you are American because Lei and I are Americans, but I have a Chinese driver's license. Lei has a Chinese driver's license.
I think it's pretty easy to get a
International.
temporary driver's license in China these days.
So Jan, well, really quickly, I know you do it already, Lei, but I am looking at doing a China tour in June. So I'm not completely focused on electric vehicles. So for those interested, you can DM me
Yeah,
to
I
learn
mean,
more
do
about
it.
it. Hold
It's
on a
one
second
way
here.
to kind of. I think last year what I remember is I did a couple of these trips is how young and international and professional these companies. Most of them are startups. There's always the BYDs and the Neos, but the ambitions, the ambitiousness you can feel, you can through speaking to these companies and their employees. Y- I mean, yeah, it's very rewarding to kind of interact with them. Um,
Yeah, so I didn't want to do it. We're not a tour company, but I've gotten enough interest from clients, partners that
yeah, it's a
it would
perfect
be
way
like
to
friends, you know?
see and experience.
So anyways, Jan MXV, what do you think we see regarding L3 in 26?
I think it's going to be a huge year because we've seen these. First of all, these license. It's called the 准入许可, which literally means entry permit. On a national level, that means you get these official license plates with the Z at the end. Z means 自动驾驶, means autonomous
这种
driving. These vehicles are only going to be operating in those limited environments that the customers can experience but cannot buy at this point in time. It's to accumulate more operational piloting experience in the future, anticipating that the L3 is officially allowed for you to buy. So if I buy, let's say, a Deepal or ArcFox, that I can use this L3 capability in certain section of roads. We're not there yet, but you're going to see more permits being announced in 2026, possibly going into 27. That you can actually buy these and have your eyes off or something. So basically in China, it's L2 plus plus. Everybody has to do it. XPeng talked about launching 3 models in 2026 of the L4 Robo. And then in between, we now have these
basically
L3.
different sizes,
Yeah.
different sizes.
And in China, the difference is 自动驾驶 versus 辅助驾驶. In the English sense, it's automated driving, which is the assisted driving, versus autonomous driving, which is 自动驾驶. That makes a huge difference because of, I think the OEMs now they have to be responsible in certain scenarios. So it's starting
That's
to
the
happen,
interesting
but
thing, though, Lei. They want to push the envelope and be able to say they're first, not only individual companies, but the country of China. I think it's gonna be very limited to begin with. I think it's gonna be very slow moving, like in traffic jams and things like that in the city. I don't think you're gonna be able to do it on highways, like, right
They
away.
Yeah, they're only, for example, the default is only allowed single lane. You cannot change lane under 50 kilometers per hour on an expressway in traffic conditions. That's the ODD at this point.
And again,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be able to do it because there'll be a limiter, and it's not like FSD in the United States where you just turn it on.
FSD is still L2 plus plus at this point.
Right. And I think FSD going to L3 in China is gonna be extremely challenging and expensive.
Well, that's an area to watch also, you know, how where does Tesla go in terms of FSD in China?
And does that
Because
if
FSD to the Chinese smart EV startups, XPeng He Xiaopeng, he tweeted this. He put up a moment saying FSD is still the gold standard, right?
he's saying that, he's saying I am reading in between the lines saying the non-Chinese version of FSD is the gold standard, not the Chinese
Yeah.
version. And it's almost a backhanded compliment because in China, Xpeng has the full level 2 plus plus, and you and I have tried it. It was almost a year ago now, or 2 years ago now, but I was pretty impressed with the G9 when we drove it. The software is much better now. But the Mace asks, "Are you guys planning to attend CES?" Yes, we are. I will be there starting on the 3rd, and I'll be there for a few days. I think you're also going to arrive in the 3rd, Lay. So
CES is where you see China.
yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, yeah, feel free to get
Yeah.
in touch. SSJJ005, he's a pretty loyal viewer, so thanks for continuing to be a part of the show. What's with all the new models by Cherry naming them even ET9, ES8, etc.? Can you use existing name in China?
I think that's the irony in China is you have these kind of naming conventions of these newer models. It's following a alphanumeric way more and more, it seems. There's no current
And
rule
that's
saying,
copying the legacy automakers,
yeah,
the
there's
Audi
no current
A8, the E-Class, stuff
there's
like
no
that.
rule saying that the Neo has an ET5 that you cannot have it exceed ET5. But right in Europe, Neo had to change their model names because Audi had the S convention, right? So it's a
Yeah.
ELA or EL7 because of that. But in China, that's just the way it is. Call it copycat or call it whatever.
They did that for the legacy
It,
automakers, and now
it's
they're
just
doing it
more
with each
fun.
other.
It's more confusing. It's more fun. It's let them do it. What the heck?
No, but don't get me wrong, Lay. You know that Neo's like, "What the hell, dude?" So
I'm like, what the
Neo's like
hell?
that. So Borg, do you expect total China NEV retail sales to continue to grow at 20% in 26?
Well, that's the thing. You mentioned that we may see a kind of a down year. Well, it depends on what happens to the export, right? 7 millions, over 2 million of that are NEVs exported. Depending on how the domestic incentive for consumption for next year, what kind of incentives are announced, I think that could be a huge factor in terms of market going up or down.
Remember
But
that we are at around 50% take rate. So, I feel we've reached the inflection point, and it's going to start to level off a little bit because the market is 25, 26 million units. So half of those, it's basically the EU. There's NEVs, like 12, 13 million NEVs in the China market to get to 15, 16, 17 over 60, 70% market share is going to be pretty challenging just because the lower tier cities are probably more comfortable with like e-revs than they are bevs. So, but we'll see. I think we'll have a good idea March, April, whether or not there will be incentives administered by the Chinese government due to the weakness. You know, we can say January and February are kind of a wash just because it's the beginning of a new year and Chinese New Year. Then you get to March and April, and I think you'll start to see whether or not there is like a foundational or systemic weakness in the passenger vehicle market, and that's when the Chinese government will likely assess whether or not they need to put their thumb on the scale.
I think it's also natural that when you have a high base, growth in some percentage slows down a bit. You're not
Okay.
gonna double 15 million, right? You can double 2 million, 3 million,
Yeah.
4 million. You're not gonna double 15 million, right? So
So Felix says BYD says 300,000 vehicles out of Hungary at some point. They say Q2 will start mass production of Surf. Do they reach 50K Surfs in Q3, Q4 combined?
very well, it's possible.
300, Felix, 300K sounds like a lot, to be honest with you.
Well, for the first
Um,
year, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty optimistic. Just because if you think about it, Felix, the legacy automakers in 26 will have more products that are competitive, hopefully competitive. You know, the MEB Plus will start launching vehicles. XPeng is going to have a better idea of their strategy and uh, kind of penetration into the international markets. Leap Motor as well, you had mentioned, has a really strong player at 28,000 euros. Again, talking about exporting the price war, we could see that in Europe in 26, but that's something we'll talk about more in about 2.5 weeks. Ran the Sino says Zeekr. He'd like to try Zeekr. So luckily, I'd gotten to try the X and the X9. The MPV is the 9X or the
Yeah,
X
well, the SUV is a 9X and the MPV is a 009.
009. Yeah. So I got to try the 007 and the 009. See, I'm getting confused with these product names. So, anyways, Urban Guitar Legend, Tale of Two Cities, but definitely the Neo ET9, and on the other end of the spectrum, the Neo Firefly. You got to at least give us a top three to try. LOL. Okay, I can do that. Top three, yeah. Just one ain't gonna do. So, what are your top three? If you said which cars did you say, Lay? Well, so Urban Guitar Legend. If you haven't driven a Xiaomi, you got to do a SU7 or a U7. That's one. I think Lay and I agree with that. And if you haven't driven a BYD, try a Han or a Tang, the newest version. I think you'll be pretty impressed with those. They're about $35,000-$40,000 in the China market. And I don't want to speak for Lay, so Lay, if you have different,
I'm gonna throw out some curveball. Try one of these Audi E5 Sportback or Mercedes CLA and compare and see
maybe the
where
Ford Bronco, maybe the
yeah,
Ford
and
Bronco.
see where they've caught up or where the difference is. I mean that's what I would want to do next time I go back, right? Because I haven't had a chance.
Oh, I'm definitely going to try out the Bronco. So I said Xiaomi, I said BYD, and Lay said, let's try a foreign legacy in the local market.
Buick Electra L7, right?
Yes. So Felix says BYD is partnering with existing dealerships. Worth
Wow,
noting that
we got a
Tesla,
lot of comments. Good to
yeah, that's
fix.
good. A little bit of marketing and some nurturing. We'll be better in 26, I think. You and I need to make more investments in marketing this, Lay. So
Yes.
Board 95, worth noting that Tesla robotaxis didn't have an issue during the recent San Francisco blackout, whereas Waymo vehicles did. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, that's a big headline of, you know,
But I look at that as more or less growing pains that Waymo will remedy pretty quickly. I don't look at that as any showstopper for them. And then Urban,
thanks,
like,
Felix.
looks like that's it. Lane, we did it in about an hour and a half. So kudos to us. Pat on ourselves on the back.
All right. Yeah, I mean, just we just riff, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I normally don't have any notes, and I only
Yeah,
peeked at my notes for first.
yeah. I mean, hopefully it was an orderly riff, not a riff
No,
riff.
it was kind of messy, I think. But everyone
Yeah.
loved the engagement. Hopefully, we and you will be more engaged in 2026. Happy holidays to everyone around the world. We have downloads in over 100 countries, so we know we have a very, very global audience. So thanks again for joining us. being a part of our community, being our friends. And Lay, I will talk to you on DMs, but brother, it's a couple days till Christmas, so happy holidays. Hopefully you've been good so Santa can come give you some great gifts.
Well, I've already
And
got this big gift here, so I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
complain.
yeah. Well, maybe another gift, maybe a little bit later, could be an EV for you, right? So
No, that's yeah, that's yeah.
everyone, I'm just gonna create a marketing document. We're pretty set on 9 a.m. Eastern time on Fridays.
Friday.
So if there's a ton of heartburn for that time and date, and I have some flexibility, but our priority is engagement. So if that's a bad time for a lot of you, you let us know. Just message us too at China EVs and more, Lay at China EVs and more, and we'll try to accommodate where we can get the most engagement. So hold on one second. Urban guitar legend. Fun fact: I rode in a BYD in Madagascar. Gas car.
Of all
So that
places.
gas car must have been 5, 6 years old at least. It is interesting that BYD and Cherry have a presence there. Gas cars, though, great show. Thanks, guys. So everyone, happy holidays, and we will see you in 6 with our first
Yes.
episode, and maybe some of you will even see you at CES in Las Vegas. Everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to a great year in 2025.
Thank you for all the support and happy holidays from my side, and we'll check out and see you next year.